Okay, so whenever we're talking about deviance in sociology, it often brings our attention to social power, which is shaped by factors like gender, race, and social class. And so, whenever we're looking at deviance, which means actions that go against accepted social norms, we must always ask the question exactly whose rules are we talking about? So, social norms are influenced by the power dynamics and class divisions in a society, and we will kind of explore that a little bit further. So, deviance refers to behavior that does not conform to norms or rules that are accepted by a significant portion of the population in a community or society. So, it's important to note that no society is very strictly divided between those who deviate from norms and those who follow them. And most people break the rules occasionally. While many deviant behaviors, like assault or murder, are criminal, not all deviant actions break the law. For example, choosing unconventional fashion or joining a religious cult might be seen as deviant, but not illegal. On the other hand, some behaviors like underage drinking or speeding are technically crimes, but are so common that they're not even seen as deviant. Sociologists often focus on behaviors that are both criminal and deviant because they impact society's safety and well-being. However, the way we view deviance can vary. For example, Kevin Mitnick is known as the world's most celebrated computer hacker. So to hackers, Mitnick is a genius who was unfairly imprisoned for his activities. And to U.S. authorities and tech companies, he's considered one of the world's most dangerous individuals. In 1995, he was arrested by the FBI for stealing software worth millions of dollars, and he was banned from using technology after his release. Yet he fought to regain access to the internet and now works as a computer security consultant. Hackers like Mitnick often see their actions as non-criminal, focusing on exploring computer systems and identifying weaknesses, as many hackers even help companies protect their systems by revealing vulnerabilities. The way we label deviance is often based on perspective, as deviance also applies to group behavior. So take the Heaven's Gate cult, for example, which was founded in the 1970s by Marshall Applewhite. The cult believed civilization was doomed and that the only way to escape was to commit suicide so that their souls could be saved by a UFO. In 1997, 39 members of the cult followed Applewhite's teachings and took part in a mass suicide. Although their beliefs were deviant from mainstream society, the group was able to survive and function within the larger community by running a successful website business and recruiting new members online. This is an example of a deviant subculture where members lived in their own world but still interacted with broader society. All right? So we can look at that kind of intersection between crime and deviance. So just a few examples there. Right, so we most often follow social norms because, as a result of socialization, we are used to doing so. So individuals become committed to social norms through interactions with people who obey the law. Through these interactions, we learn self-control, and the more numerous these interactions, the fewer opportunities, rather, we're going to have to deviate from conventional norms. So over time, the longer we interact in conventional ways, the more we stand to lose by not conforming. So all social norms carry some sort of sanctions with them that promote conformity and protect against nonconformity. A sanction is any reaction from others that is meant to ensure that a person or group complies with the given norm. So sanctions can be positive. This is offering a reward for conformity, or negative, which might be punishment for behavior that doesn't conform. They can also be formal or informal. Formal sanctions are applied by a specific group or agency to ensure that a particular set of norms is followed, and then informal sanctions are less organized and more spontaneous reactions to nonconformity, such as when a student's friend teasingly accuses him of working too hard or being a nerd if he spends an evening studying rather than going to a party. Courts and prisons represent the main type of formal sanctions in our modern societies, and the police are charged with bringing offenders to trial and possibly having them imprisoned. So laws are norms defined by government as principles their citizens have to follow, and sanctions are then used against the people who do not conform to those particular principles. When there are laws, there are also crimes, because crime constitutes any type of behavior that breaks said law. So, to understand crime, we must look at it from a sociological perspective because what is considered criminal depends on a society's social institutions. So, different social groups and subcultures have different definitions of what is acceptable. For example, a gang member might feel pressured to steal a car to prove himself, even though stealing is generally seen as deviant. Social inequality also plays a major role in shaping who has the opportunity to commit certain types of crime. People from poorer backgrounds are more likely to commit theft or burglary, while wealthier individuals are more likely to commit crimes like embezzlement or tax evasion. As functionalist theories suggest that crime occurs whenever there's a gap between people's desires and the available opportunities to achieve those desires. So when people can't achieve their goals through legitimate means, they often turn to deviance. So Emil Durkheim and Robert Merton both argue that deviance stems from the structure of modern societies. Durkheim in particular introduced the concept of anomie, which occurs when traditional norms and values are weakened or replaced, and they leave people unsure about exactly how to behave. In such situations, people may feel disoriented or anxious, which can lead to higher rates of deviant behavior, including things like suicide, which is what Durkheim spent a lot of his time studying. He believed, though, that crime and deviance are inevitable in modern societies because of increased individual freedoms. He also argued that deviance serves important social functions as it can promote social change and strengthen social cohesion. For example, when a neighborhood reacts to a crime like drug dealing, it can come together and reaffirm a commitment to being a drug-free zone, as Durkheim's ideas help shift the focus from individual problems to broader social forces. The concept of anomie was later developed by American sociologist Robert Merton, who applied it to explain crime in American society. Merton believed that crime results from the pressure individuals feel whenever they're unable to achieve society's goals through an acceptable mean. In the U.S., the belief that anyone can succeed with hard work overlooks the fact that many people, especially those from disadvantaged backgrounds, don't have access to the same, or equal access, rather, to the same opportunities, like quality education. When these people can't achieve success, they may feel pressured to do so by any means, including illegal ones. Merton identified 5 ways that people respond to tension between social or societal goals and the means available to achieve them. So, conformists accept both societal values and the means of achieving them, even if they don't succeed. Innovators, so they accept societal values, but they use illegal or unconventional methods to achieve them, like members of the mafia who seek wealth through crime. Ritualists, they strictly follow societal rules, but without caring about the original goals behind them. For example, someone might stick with a job that provides no reward simply because they feel the need to follow the rules. Retreatists, they reject both the goals and the means of achieving them. An example could be a member of a self-supporting commune who rejects mainstream success. And then rebels, who reject both the existing goals and the means of achieving them and work to create new values and a new social system altogether. This might be a radical political or religious group like the Heaven's Gate cult, for example. So Merton's theories address the major puzzle in criminology. Why, when society was becoming wealthier overall, did crime rates continue to rise? He argued that as people's aspirations for success increased, but opportunities remained unequal, many felt relative deprivation, or that is, they felt that they had less than their peers, and that sense of inequality, he believed, was a key driver in deviant behavior. So later researchers examined subcultural groups that adopt norms that encourage or reward criminal behavior. And like Merton, Albert Cohen was able to see a contradiction within American society as the main cause of crime. But while Merton emphasized individual deviant responses, Cohen saw the responses occurring collectively through subculture. In Delinquent Boys, released in 1955, Cohen argues that frustrated boys in the lower working class often join delinquent subcultures, such as gangs, and these subcultures reject middle-class values and replace them with norms that celebrate nonconformity and deviance, such as delinquency. Richard A. Cloward and Lloyd E. Olin agreed with Cohen that most delinquent youths emerge from the lower working class, but they also argued that such gangs arise in subculture communities where a chance of achieving success legitimately are slim as among deprived ethnic minorities. Cloward and Olin's work emphasized connections between conformity and deviance, as individuals follow rules when they have the opportunity to do so and break them whenever they don't. So as a result, they develop subcultures with deviant values in responds to a lack of legitimate opportunities for success as defined by the wider society. This lack of opportunity is the differentiating factor between those who engage in criminal behavior and those who do not. Functionalist theories rightly emphasize connections between conformity and deviance in different social contexts. We should kind of be cautious, though, about accepting the idea that people in poor communities aspire to the same things as more affluent people. Most adjust their aspirations to the reality of the situation. As Merton, Cohen, Cloward, and Olin can all be criticized for presuming that middle-class values are what are accepted throughout the entirety of society, it would also be wrong to suppose that only the less privileged experience a mismatch of aspirations and opportunities. Pressures towards criminal activities exist in other groups, too, as indicated by the large number of white-collar crimes of embezzlement, fraud, and tax evasion. How do sociologists differentiate between deviant behaviors that are considered criminal and those that are not, and what are some examples that illustrate the distinction? So we recognize that deviant behaviors can either be criminal or non-criminal based on societal norms. For example, committing assault or murder is both criminal and deviant, while making bizarre fashion choices or joining a religious cult might be seen as deviant but not criminal. So conversely, underage drinking or speeding may be technically illegal but are often viewed as normative and thus not considered deviant. And so remember, that deals with the law, right? So if the society has created a law and you're breaking the law, maybe criminal and deviant, or criminal and normative. All right, so anyway, sociologists studying crime and deviance in the interactionist tradition rather focus on deviance as a socially constructed phenomenon, rejecting the idea that some types of conduct are inherently deviant. They ask how behaviors get defined as deviant and why only certain groups get labeled as deviant. So in 1949, Edwin H. Sutherland advanced the notion that influenced much of the later interactionist work whenever he linked crime to what he called differential association. The differential association theory argues that we learn deviant behavior in precisely the same way we learn about conventional behavior. So from our contacts with primary groups such as peers, family members, and coworkers. The term differential refers to the ratio of deviant to conventional social contacts that we have. We become deviant when exposed to a higher level of deviant persons and influences compared with conventional influences. So in a society that contains a variety of subcultures, some individuals have greater exposure to social environments that encourage illegal activities. So, in absolutely the most simple way possible to understand differential association theory is that the more deviant people you are around, the more likely you are to be deviant. Okay? So, the less likely. That's all that really is, which seemingly tends to prove pretty true. Okay, so labeling theory, which is introduced by Howard S. Becker, suggests that deviance is not about the act itself, but rather how society reacts to it. For example, marijuana use in the 1960s was labeled deviant because of how others perceived it. Labeling theorists argue that people in positions of power define what is deviant, which reflects social power structures. So behaviors that might be seen as innocent in affluent neighborhoods could be labeled rather as deviant or delinquent in poorer areas. And Edward Lemert in 1972 introduced primary and secondary deviance. So primary is the initial act of rule breaking, and then secondary is whenever individuals kind of accept that they've been labeled as deviant, and they kind of live their life accordingly. So negative self-perception can lead to further criminal behavior in that case. So for example, Luke may break a window and get a warning, but if labeled as a delinquent, he may continue to act accordingly. So labeling theory basically argues no act is inherently criminal, but becomes so through laws and authority. As critics say, it overlooks the deeper reasons for deviance, as people's backgrounds and opportunities do shape their behavior. It's also unclear if being labeled as deviant directly leads to further crime or not. Okay, so again, the other thing with labeling is it does create what is called stigma. So whenever you're labeled as deviant, it creates a stigma or something that follows you around, basically, and makes it more difficult to get a job, makes it more difficult to connect with people, etc., and that can lead to further deviant behavior, even for someone trying to live a more normal life. Anyway, so conflict theory, influenced by Marxist thought, of course, views deviance as intentional and often political. Unlike other theories that focus on factors like biology or labels, conflict theorists argue that people choose deviant behavior in response to the inequalities in society, particularly the capitalist system. For example, groups like the Black Power movement or the LGBTQ plus rights activists are seen as challenging the social order through their deviance. So more recently, movements like Occupy Wall Street and Black Lives Matter have also been viewed as political acts of resistance, and conflict theorists believe that laws are designed to benefit the powerful, maintaining their privilege, and they argue that laws aren't applied equally and the criminal justice system disproportionately targets the working class while allowing the wealthy to break laws with little consequence. While white-collar crimes may be more significant, law enforcement often focuses on street-level crimes committed by poorer individuals, such as drug use or prostitution. Scholars like Chambliss and Pierce have helped highlight how crime is tied to social inequality, power, and competing interests in society. So, and if you compare like how white-collar crimes are charged, these people have, I don't remember whether we've looked at the number or not, or whether it comes later, but whenever you find the number for how much white-collar crime and embezzlement and stuff like that takes out of the economy versus people stealing a car or stealing something from the grocery store, it just, it's mind-boggling because it's trillions of dollars, like, that these people are stealing, and then whenever they get caught, they serve 5 or 6 years in a very minimum security prison with absolutely no chance of being murdered in their sleep, type of thing. Meanwhile, somebody that stole a can of peaches so they could feed their kid or something might get 5 or 6 years in prison simply because they can't afford a good enough lawyer to get them off on that charge. Anyway, so you can see their point to a degree. Okay, so control theory suggests that crime happens when there's an imbalance between people's impulses to engage in criminal activity and the social or physical controls that prevent it. So the theory assumes that people act rationally, meaning that if given the opportunity, anyone could commit deviant acts. Travis Hershey, a well-known control theorist, argued that people are naturally selfish and make decisions about crime by weighing the risks and rewards. In his book, Causes of Delinquency, released in '69, he identified 4 key bonds that help maintain social control and prevent deviance: attachment, commitment, involvement, and belief. Attachment referring to the emotional and social connections with people who follow conventional norms, such as peers who value school success. Commitment is the value people place on the reward of conventional activities, like a student's desire to go to college or trade school or something, which they risk losing if they engage in criminal behavior. And then involvement, which involves participating in conventional activities like work, school, or community events, which leaves less time for deviant behavior. And then belief is holding values that align with society's conventional norms, like believing that honesty leads to success. So when these bonds are strong, they help prevent crime by making it harder for people to break the rules or to convince themselves to break the rules. But when these bonds are weak, deviance can occur. Hershey believed that delinquent behavior results from lower self-control, which can be traced back to poor socialization at home or school. And some control theorists also argue that crime increases as modern societies offer more opportunities and targets for crime. With more people owning valuable goods like electronics and cars, and thieves have more to steal. As a result of that, the rise in crime is also connected to more people having been away from home during the day, as women have entered the workforce in larger and larger numbers, leaving homes vulnerable to burglary. In response, crime prevention strategies often focus on limiting opportunities for crime, known as target hardening. And this includes using crime deterrent methods like security systems, ring, blink cameras, all that stuff, community policing in gated neighborhoods. While the measures can reduce crime, they don't address the root cause of criminal behavior. And furthermore, they create a fortress mentality where wealthier communities invest heavily in security, and crime simply shifts to less protected areas, particularly in poor neighborhoods. Yeah, I mean, you're going to find much nicer stuff in those houses than you will in mine. So please don't rob my house. Don't go after theirs. If you're going to rob people, just saying, right? So Okay, so target hardening and zero tolerance policing are based on the broken windows theory, which comes from a study by social psychologist Philip Zimbardo in 1969. So Zimbardo left cars without license plates and with their hoods up in two very different neighborhoods, the wealthy community of Palo Alto, California, and a poor area in the Bronx, New York. In both places, the cars were vandalized once people, regardless of their race, or class, saw the vehicles appeared abandoned. And based on this study, Wilson and Kelling argued that the visible sign of disorder in community, like broken windows, encourages more serious crimes to occur. A single broken window, they claimed, sends a message that no one cares, which can lead criminals to commit more serious acts. In this way, small acts of deviance snowball into larger crimes and social decay. So in the 1980s and 90s, this theory helped shape policing strategies that focused on minor offenses like traffic violations and public drinking or drug use, and research shows that this approach aimed at maintaining public order can reduce more serious crimes like robbery. However, it's still unclear if the broken windows theory applies to all types of crime. For instance, while walking through a neighborhood filled with trash might encourage people to litter, it might not necessarily lead to more serious crimes like someone murdering someone, right? So unless they just really hate littering, I guess. Without a clear definition of disorder, police can interpret nearly anything as a sign of trouble and see anyone as a potential criminal. Even though crime rates have dropped in the 1990s, complaints of police abuse and harassment, especially from young urban black men who fit the criminal profile, so to speak, have increased. Okay, so the contributions to the sociological theories of crime and deviance are twofold. First, these theories correctly emphasize that criminal and respectable behavior are not two discrete categories, rather they are points along a continuum, and the context in which particular types of activity are seen as criminal and punishable by law vary quite widely. So, second, all agree that context is important. Whether someone engages in a criminal act or comes to be regarded as a criminal is influenced by social learning and social surroundings. In spite of its deficiencies, labeling theory is perhaps the most widely used approach to understanding crime and deviant behavior, and it explains how some activities become defined in the law as punishable and the power relationships that form such definitions, and the circumstances in which particular individuals fall afoul of the law. The way in which crime is understood directly affects the policies that are developed to combat it. For example, if crime is seen as the product of deprivation or social disorganization, policies might be aimed at reducing poverty and strengthening social services, and if criminality is seen as freely chosen, attempts to counter it are going to take a different form. That's where we'll stop at for today.